Hello and welcome back to the Rook's Nest. It's Alex here, and this is the second part of a tutorial double header. So if you haven't seen the first part, you should check that out first. The link is in the description. In this part we'll be looking at the last two materials. I won't be building them from scratch, but I will walk you through each node graph and explain what each part does, and hopefully keep this part nice and concise. With that all said, let's get started. So here we are inside Cinema 4D. And let's start off by looking at this stainless steel, this brushed stainless steel and bubbly glass material. It's pretty straightforward. It's not as complicated as the last one in the first tutorial, part one. So it shouldn't take that long to go through it. Let's first start off by just looking at the stainless steel material. You turn off the bucket, so we're in IPR. And let's just link this stainless steel straight through. And let's remove our displacement for now. And just take a look at it. Right, so you can see we've got these fine scratches or like brushed effect going on. That's achieved in the bump channel with a couple of Maxon noises. First, let's look at what makes the material function. I've actually just used the iron preset. And I don't think I've changed anything. So it's simple as just coming here and selecting iron. Yeah, so it's exactly the same. I've done nothing to this, apart from threading into the bump channel. Right, so that's that. So that's easy to create. This is a bump map node, which you need to reference this bump channel. So the first part is this fire noise. I'm using this just to vary this noise, and this noise, as you'll see, is a booyah noise. And what I've done is I've just dropped the overall scale really low and scaled it in both directions. So if I change this to, you'll see, change to 1 and this to 1. See, that's what it looks like first. But I've just scaled it on both of these and then made this tiny. And it gives us these dashed lines. And then I'm just mixing that. I mean, actually, this is an unnecessary step here, so I'll remove that. You shouldn't actually need that. And if we look at that directly in the surface, you see I've just because it looked a bit too uniform, so I've just put them through a color shader in an additive mode, just so it wasn't always, I don't know, just felt a bit too aggressive without it. And then that goes into the bump. Yeah, the bump is just set to. Oh, I made the scale quite low. The scale's only at 0.01 height field. This is the default because I didn't want it to. If it gets too high, you'll start to see it just gets a bit too. I didn't want it this aggressive. I'll just drop it back down to 0.1 or 0.01. I mean. There we go, much better. Okay, so that's the stainless steel material. Now let's take a look at the glass. So we could take the glass straight out. Now this is just straightforward. This is just your standard material. I've put a bit of colour in the diffuse. I've increased the roughness because I didn't want it too clear. I wanted it to be a bit murky. And I've just given it a refraction transmission color, and I haven't changed anything else. It's just this. So this is the main thing that will affect how the texture looks. So somewhere around there is good. And then we've got the color, which is what's making it this blue in the refraction transmission color. Undo that. Let's see if we can get a different color to come through. There you go. I mean, it doesn't look as great because I think this diffuse. But there we go. So that's... I'm not even sure how much this makes a difference. No, nothing. I think this can be black. Yeah. So yeah, that doesn't really matter so much. But just because I like to keep things, so I'm just going to put that back on. I mean, it does give it a little, I think it does make a tiny difference, so leave that as that. So that's the glass material. Then all we're doing is we need to blend these two materials together into a material blender to give us our stripes. Now if I'm just going to put this in the base color, stick it in to there. Let's remove this blend for now and pop this as our layer 1. Okay, so we're not seeing the glass material. It's because we need to create a mat to, you know, tell which parts are going to be glass and which parts are going to be iron. And we do that with this. We use the Cinema 4D shader and load a gradient in. So we have a look at that. If we look at that straight onto the surface, which we can't do. So you've got to, in order to use these, you've got to then pass it into a Redshift shader node. And what I've done with this, so it comes into the Redshift shader node, into the text 0, and output. And the reason why you can see these stripes on this ramp is because I've scaled it along the U coordinates. So that's what it would be like default. So I just put 16 because I want 8 strips. And then I run it through this ramp. So we place that into this ramp just to clamp down these values to make it harsher. So if I show you that, you see now we've got this harder edge. And that is what we put into our blend material, and blend color 1. Remove it, plug this back in, and you see now we've got just the glass and the iron. Now the next step is to do the displacement. And the displacement, once again, you create a displacement node. Let's just put that into our surface. And what we're going to do is we're going to multiply these two mats together. So if I unlink this for now, let's have a look at what this displacement is doing. Oh, I put that into the wrong channel. Let's put it into the surface. Okay, so all I've done is I've just used this Voronoi 3 noise and just left everything at default, just to get this almost like alien-y looking or crystalline structure. And I've just put that into this ramp input, which I don't need because it's, as you can see, it's doing nothing. So delete that. Remove from there. If we see that by itself, we need to put this into this, bypass that, so you can see what this is doing on its own. Okay, so now we've got it affecting the entire, both materials, but we don't want this cell affecting the cell noise affecting the metal. So we're just going to take this shader that this ramp here, what we've used, the mat we've used to mask the materials out, and just multiply these two together. And then your output, if you look at the surface, you get these hard black lines where we don't want it to displace. So we just put that straight into our displacement. Move this. Let's link our main material back up. Well, there we go. I hope that all made sense. I think it was a bit quicker than last time, hopefully. Well, let's move on to the third and final procedural material. Okay, this is our marble texture with the gold veins running through it, or copper. It's just made up of two materials. It's made up of the main marble material and then the gold veins running through it, or copper I should say. Let's start by looking at the marble material. Now this is basically just a material with refraction and subsurface to create this sort of... I'll try and show you what it would look like if it didn't have subsurface. So if it was just like a white material, let's put it in here. And we put the diffuse color that we're using into it. And had no refraction. None of this. Let's put it in, sorry, in IPR. Can you see how it just looks... I mean, it's not very nice. It looks flat. It doesn't look like marble. There's no... It's just a purely diffuse. You don't get any subsurface scattering. You know, it doesn't feel real because marble seems to transmit... You know, the light seems to go into marble and scatter out of it. It doesn't just bounce off the surface. So let's just put this back in. Put this back into our base material color. And I've just set, in fact, this can be 0 on the subsurface. It doesn't matter so much because we're using the scatter. But I'll show you what happens if we raise this scatter value. It gets all dark, you know, because it's scattering it way more. It becomes way more diffuse and almost like our non-subsurface material. But I found a value of 0.09 worked the best. Refraction weight 0.866, so not full. Still want a bit of the your standard material coming through. And then on top of it, oh wait, and the roughness is being controlled by our displacement as well with the ramp here, but we'll get to that a bit later. But it does have a coating. I've just set this coating value to just to give it this sheen like it's been polished. So you get two. It's sometimes good practice when you want these sort of machined materials, especially like paint and things like that. Normally have a coating on top, and this is a good way to do it. You can see that if I reduce this roughness, it'll be super shiny. I suppose it doesn't make that much difference, but I'm going to put this back. So how it was. And then going into that, we've got these 3 noises which are going to a color layer, which are blending them together. We're going to this ramp, and I'll show you what these 3 noises together look like. Look like this. It's quite a nice little. You see just to create this detail and surface imperfections and variations in the color, and then I run that through this ramp just to modify the colors a bit so that it's not so garish. So you get this more a muted tone, and I'm just putting that straight into the diffuse for the material. Now, so if we have a look at these, let me pipe that. Let's keep looking at material 1. So if we have a look at these noises, the first one is the veins. Look at those. So see these these where the gold or the copper is going to run through. We're going to use this as a mat to mat out those bits. All I've done is increase the overall scale and scaled it along one axis to make it look stretched and like it's moved through the material. Because if it's just one, it looks a bit. It didn't look quite right to me. So I up that to 4. Made it look a bit more interesting, like we'd sliced through the block of marble. And then I've upped the cycles. So that just makes it. I'll show you. Move this up. Go to the clip. What the cycles does, it just loops around. So it repeats its pattern. So that's what the base is 1. And you see, and then the cycles, it like iterates on itself, and it gets more complex, and like you can see, you start getting these extra layers where it's gone inside, where it's looped around and round and round. It's hard to explain, but you I just upped the cycles to about 4 and reduced the high clip until I had it about right to get these nice fine lines. And the second surface is this, which is just a knacky noise. And all I've done here is I've just scaled it the same way as the other one, but haven't done the cycles just to get a softer, and I haven't clipped it, but it's pretty much the same. I haven't clipped it, so it's just to break up, just give more variation of the same sort of patterns. And the last one for the color is this a booyah noise. Well, I've done the same thing with the cycles again. If I show you what it looks like without it, it's just, I don't know, it just didn't have enough variation in it for this type of material, so I just popped it up until it looked about right. In fact, I can't remember what I had there before. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. And then what else have I done? Oh, I've also scaled it in the same axis in the same direction as the other side. I've left everything else default, and oh, and I adjusted the brightness a bit and the contrast slightly, just to. I mean, it's really you can barely notice it. And then those are piped into this color layer. Let's just remove layer 3 color and have a look. So I'll show you what happens. In fact, I didn't need to remove that. I could just disable it. So we'll put that on here. General layer 3 color. So I've got a base color of white, and then I'm applying this. Disable these two. So I'm applying this veins onto here with a darken. So just taking the dark areas of which is the black lines, and just almost subtracting them from the white. The second one, doing the same thing again. I'm just taking the dark areas from this noise and subtracting them. And for the final one, I'm averaging, which I just thought looked a bit better than the others. It just had a nice, it seemed to like smooth out. I used it to smooth out all the colors, and it just gave it a bit more, seemed like it all fit together nicer. Yeah, and then that runs into the ramp where we color it, and into our diffuse, and we get our final output for the marble. For the marble. Now, for the copper/gold, I've already mentioned this thing before, but it's just the base copper. I preferred it to the gold. It just looked nicer. So it's becoming a running theme is using this copper. And the only thing I've applied to it is the coating. So I've given it exactly the same coating settings as my, oh, not the same actually, the different, because on the gold, I remember now. But if we look at this directly, you'll see it's just got this, and it's got the roughness coming. So if I remove the roughness, there we go. You see it's got the displacement on it as well. Because I wanted it to see, the reason I put the coating on is because I wanted to fit in with the marble, so it looked like it, you know, they were polished together. You know, and it was revealed. It's revealed the veins, and then all I'm doing is blending these two together, using our veins here to create a mask, and I've had to invert it, because if I didn't invert it, I'll show you what it looks like. Layer 1, a blend color. If I output that, it was gold, and then the marble was in the scratches. So I just use the RS color invert just to flip it round. So we had the gold in there, and then the last thing is just the displacement. And all I really did for this was just put a blister turbulence. I stretched it out again over that axis, adjust the scale, run it through the displacement, which I lowered to 0.2 from the default 1 because it was a bit too aggressive, and then put that straight into our output. I'll show you what happens if it's a 2. If it's the default of 1, you can see it just looks a bit bobbly, and it's too much displacement. It's too aggressive, and you can start to see it really here. It's not as smooth. I mean, maybe you want that. If you want that, that's great. But I wanted it to seem a bit smoother, but I still wanted a little bit of imperfections in the surface. So I just lowered it down to 0.2. So there we go. All finished. I hope that all made sense. If you liked this video, please subscribe and leave a comment. Any questions, I'll be getting back to them. If you didn't like the video, please let me know too, because it's always good to get some feedback. All the project files can be found on our Patreon. The link's in the description if you want to go check that out. It's been a pleasure. Thanks and goodbye.